Okay, so I wanted to do another video on hoovering, and I've seen this question a couple of different times where victims, they feel guilty about this, and I went through this too, so I totally get where you're coming from, but they think, well, maybe he wasn't a narcissist because he didn't hoover, right? So he's not coming back. He's not trying to get back into your life. But the reality is, it's generally that first year. If they're going to Hoover, they'll come back that first year. This isn't to say that you're out of the woods after that year. It's not uncommon for a narcissist to come back years, if not decades, after they left. And so a narcissist will come back if they need a source of supply, right? So they're not going to probably come back right away because odds are they've already lined up that next source of supply, right? So they've moved on, and then they're going to drain that person, and that can take anywhere from, a few weeks to a few months. But generally, if they know that they can come back to you, they probably will. Now, the first covert narcissist that I dated, Jack, I was so confused by that relationship because, there are so many different reasons, but he was a covert narcissist. I didn't know what a narcissist was at the time. I was operating from the standpoint that a narcissist was somebody who had this, huge ego and was very full of themselves, kind of like your Donald Trump, right? And Jack was the exact opposite. He came across as very humble, very kind, very charming, like a really great guy. So when that relationship went south, at first, I took it so personally because he was so wonderful that I thought, what is wrong with me? Like, why couldn't I be enough? And I began reading, I stumbled across narcissism, I stumbled across the word sociopath and psychopath. And the more I began reading about it, the more I'm like, yeah, this is totally him. Because I was finding out, that he was having sex with everybody in town. And then, it's hard to not take that personally. And so then I came across the term hoovering. And then I thought, well, he never hoovered me, so maybe he's not a narcissist. And I think a lot of people kind of question that, right? So then I thought, well, maybe he's not a narcissist, so maybe he really could have changed. And maybe I gave up too soon, and maybe, right? But the reality is, he is definitely a narcissist. He's definitely kind of more of like the malignant kind of in between, right? So a little bit of narcissist, a little bit of sociopath there. The reason he didn't hoover me, and of course I'm thinking clearly now, this relationship was about 5.5, 6 years ago. So it's easy for me to look back on this with the blinders off, right? The reason I really feel he didn't hoover was because he couldn't have gotten a source of supply out of me. I had come across so much information on him that there was no way in hell he stood a chance of getting back in my life, and he knew that. Now, had I not stumbled across everything that I had, he probably, and I don't live in the same state. So if I'd lived in the same state, if there was a chance that he could maybe manipulate the information that I had found, if he could have convinced me that, his cheating was the other woman, or if he could have somehow done damage control, then he probably would have hoovered. He couldn't do that. I found, dozens upon dozens of text messages. I confronted him. I was the one that broke that relationship off, not him. So it didn't go according to his plan. There was no formal devalue stage in that relationship, at least to my face. I have no doubt in my mind, knowing what I know now, that I'm sure he was talking trash about me to anybody that would listen, because that's really what they do, right? He talked a ton of trash about his ex-wife and his ex-girlfriend, really had me convinced that he was the victim, but that, of course, was not the reality, right? So, but Steve, my second covert one, he did hoover me. And again, he hoovered until his wife called me and we found out about each other. And then we began talking. And during this whole time, he's sitting here telling her how much he loves her. He's willing to make it work. He's so incredibly sorry. And then, of course, he's telling me the exact same thing. I was living, Steve, if you're familiar or not familiar with the story, he had upped and left his wife. He'd quit his job. He gave away his dog. He sold his car. He cashed out his retirement. He put off all these bombs in his life to up and move to Michigan with me, because I'd made it very clear to him that I was moving to Michigan. Like, with or without him, I'm moving to Michigan. And then really, he couldn't get any traction here in Michigan, and he ended up moving back to New Mexico, which is where his wife lived. So he was trying to convince me to move back to New Mexico, of course, pretending that, you know, he loved me, home was wherever I was, blah, blah, blah. And the reality is he just wanted his wife and his girlfriend within driving distance. For him, it was all, of course, like, it's just pure selfishness. He did try really, really hard to hoover and to get me back, and that did not work because his wife, thank goodness I was able to develop a rapport with her. We were sharing all of our information, all of our text messages and everything back and forth with each other. So once he was confronted by her that, hey, the gig's up, I know that you're talking to Dana, there was no, I mean, again, he couldn't out-talk his way out of that. There had been too much damage done. He could not do damage control. So once he realized that, yes, it was completely over, you know, though, I take that back. He did stop hoovering in a more direct way, because as soon as I cut things off, see, the only reason I kept in contact with him, so he moved back, okay? He moved back. I didn't have any contact with him for a few weeks. I really thought I'd never hear from him again because he upped and left. It was very sudden. It was very it was very unexpected. Then all like the real crazy stuff began. That's when I really began to wonder if I was dealing with yet another narcissist. And but at the time, I really believed his story. I really believed him. He really had me snowed. He told me he was going back to New Mexico to take care of his sick wife who had cancer. And well, at first he was going to go back because he really missed his adult son who lived in Arizona. Of course, that makes no sense. Arizona, New Mexico, there's like, 6 hours away from where his son was going to be. And so I was keeping in communication with him because he owed me money. He owed me like $8,000. And so I kind of felt like if I kept in touch with him, then I'd have a stand a chance to get repaid. And so that was just this, oh my God, for like the next maybe month or so, it was so incredibly stressful because here I'm a terrible liar, like terrible liar. And so I'm trying to not let him know that I know the truth. And it was just incredibly stressful. I didn't know how he was going to react once he found out that his wife and I were talking. I didn't think it was going to go well. His wife, I'll call her Molly. Molly and I both were terrified for each other's safety. And she had said, she's like, Dana, he won't stop. He will show up. She's like, if I kick him out and I totally get rid of him, she's like, he will show up on your doorstep. He had been throwing out just every trick in the book to worm his way back into her house. She, of course, was livid because he just had, totally selfishly, set off this huge bomb in her life. She didn't expect him to up and leave her. There was no problem in their marriage, right? He just saw me as opportunity and told me a bunch of lies and then wanted to let it run its course. So she, was really tired of it. Well, okay, so after we confronted him, I went no contact. I called both of my parents and said, he might show up. He might call you. Like, do not answer the phone. Of course, I couldn't get to my mother in time because she never answers her cell phone. So he did end up calling her, and probably like 10 o'clock at night, and said, for whatever reason, he was really fixated on me checking my email. Because he had emailed me all of this stuff, but it's not like it made any difference one way or the other. But in his mind, it did. He'd called me probably 50 or so times, maybe even 100. He'd emailed me a ton. He texted me probably another 50 times. This was all within like a 24-hour period. I would not answer my phone. He calls my mom, tells her to tell me to check my email. Then he sends me this real snarky text message saying, was that so hard? It didn't need to be like that. I just wanted you to check your email, have a good life. And I checked my email. There was nothing, like, he's just nuts. I don't even know what that was supposed to do or prove. So he did keep paying me. He, of course, he sent it in like checks of, I don't know, it was like $200 a month or so and then every now and again he'd send like a larger amount. But every month I was getting that check. Every month it was a reminder of him, right? And about once a month I would get a phone call anytime, day or night. well, so maybe just a little often, more often than once a month, but it was probably on average probably about once a month. I would get a blocked call, and they would not leave a message, and it would just be dead air. And I'm positive it was him. I've never gotten blocked phone calls before. I have never gotten blocked phone calls since. And this went on for about a year. And the last time I got one of those phone calls, of course, it's totally upsetting, right? So I get that, and then I get back in this whole, I miss him, and it just throws you for a loop, and that's intentional. Like he really wanted me to be thinking about him. That's what all of that behavior was about. The last phone call that I got from him, I did answer it. It was, I forget what time of year it was, but I think it was around Christmas. I answered the phone, and of course, he's not saying anything. And I told him, I said, now granted, mind you, I'm 26 hours away. So I feel fairly, and he's always broke. So I feel very safe knowing that he's not going to show up, but that I'm not in danger here. But I told him, I said, I just want you to know that I find you to be absolutely pathetic. And I don't think about you at all. I've moved on. I started dating other people, like get a life and get out of mine. And then I hung up, and I never heard from him since. So that's like the worst narcissistic injury that you can give a narcissist, is to let them know that you just mean nothing to me. Like, you're trying to get me so riled up. You're trying to upset me to such a huge degree. But I will say, I really kind of don't recommend you doing that, because when a narcissist suffers a narcissistic injury like that, a big blow to their ego, that's when you start seeing that narcissistic rage. Had I lived in the same town, had he had the capacity to come get me, I would never have done anything like that. Because their rage is totally unpredictable when they are crossed like that. This is when, they say victims are the most at risk when they try to leave, and that's why. Because all of a sudden the game, that power and control that drives a narcissist, that game is up, and it's up on the victim's terms, not the narcissist's. And so if you flip all that power and control, and it's sort of like, you know what, you're pathetic, you're nothing, ego injury, ego injury, ego injury, I'm leaving, ego injury, right? That's when they freak out, and they're totally unpredictable. Both Steve and Jack, I was absolutely terrified at first, even though with Steve, I lived 26 hours away. For the first couple weeks after his wife had confronted him, I bought bear mace. I was terrified that he was going to show up on my doorstep. Even though he lived so far away, because you just don't know. You realize right around that point that you're dealing with a person who's not balanced, and that they are truly capable of anything. Everything about him is a lie. Everything is a manipulation. Everything is following their whims and living in the moment. So they're very terrifying. So if you're not being hoovered, at the end of the day, consider yourself lucky. I know it's really hard to let go of these people. It's hard to let go of the idea of this person that you thought that they were. And that, honestly, it just takes time. Please don't feel guilty about it. Please don't feel, I know it's a whole mix of emotions. I know it's really hard to talk to other people about this, because other people, if they've never gone through something like this, they don't get it. They don't understand how you can miss somebody who has such terrible behavior and who's such a sack of shit, right? But it takes a while for your heart to catch up with your brain. Like, your brain knows that they are an awful person. It just takes your heart time to catch up to that, especially if that devalue stage wasn't really there, or if you quickly went to like a discard. It just takes a while. So be kind to yourself. Join some support groups. There's plenty of them out there on Facebook, probably even in your hometown. I will put a link to mine down below. I always encourage people, join a few different groups, see which one is a good fit for you, see where you feel the most comfortable, and then kind of go from there. So my website, it's called narcissistsupport.com. My Facebook group is also called Narcissist Support. My name is Dana, and I will see you soon. Okay, take care.